Hi there, welcome to another video from the Vickers MG Collection and Research Association, and this is another of our How Let Loose series, and I'm really pleased that Matt has joined us from the Armourer's Bench to start to take a closer look at some of the weapons that we've got left to cover in the series from the British faction. So today we're going to look at pistols, and Matt's going to help me with that, so thanks for coming along, Matt.
Always happy to help. It's been a really great series of videos so far, so looks like we're going to dive into some pistols.
The pistol that's in the game is the Webley Mark 6. It's in 4.55 caliber. It was brought in at the start of the Great War to replace the Webley Mark 4, which was in considerable numbers. You can see that it's got a short barrel, but largely is otherwise the same pistol. And so it fires a 4.55. It's a break-open revolver, which means it carries 6 rounds of that larger ammunition. And it stayed in service until the mid-1930s. It then started to be phased out and replaced with the 38 revolvers, like this. But it did see some use in the Second World War, and there is an Australian pamphlet for the pistol revolver .455, but in British Army service it really wasn't something that was widespread, and certainly not in the infantry elements.
Of course, in the game it's predominantly used by the squad leader, which obviously in the actual period itself it would have been carried by the platoon commander, and that was a choice on their part as well. But this is the number 2 Mark 1 Enfield. And then there was also a version where they cut off the hammer spur, which was essentially to make training simpler. With the first iteration of the pistol, you can use single action, which is pulling the hammer back, pulling the trigger. But you can also do double action, which is pulling the trigger clean through, which is what we get here, so there's no single action.
So the myth is that this was cut off so it didn't get caught on tankers' uniforms and stuff like that, because they're really obvious in this is a bit like the MG42 carrying tank more than the Bren argument, because it's obvious, people say it's the truth, in that in a tanker holster, tanky holster, you can see the hammer's not there. So, whereas actually in every holster, it just has a flap, so you can't see it for the infantry. But yeah, it simplifies it into double action only. It's a simplified training burden.
So Rich, what other pistols could the character actually be carrying?
So really they'd be using a 38 revolver. So it goes from this larger 4.55 down to a 38. That's fine. But we couldn't supply, our Enfield couldn't supply lots of these, so actually even in the 30s Albion produced quite a lot of these. They're quite nice revolvers, and then Webley take on that design as well, and the Mark IV Webley is the same kind of design, but also they were supplied with these. So these are Smith & Wesson made, classic Smith & Wesson revolver, commonly called the Victory revolver. They were supplied to British and Commonwealth troops, so we see these certainly a lot with Commonwealth troops. And Rex Fendick in the book Can Lone Officer talks about having a Smith & Wesson as a platoon commander, but actually he also talks about carrying a Colt 45 as well. So the Colt 45 automatic, the M1911 with a 7-round magazine, powering 4.5 ACP, completely incompatible ammunition with the others, and earlier British versions of this used by the Royal Air Force used 4.55, different caliber to the 4.55 Webley, but these were used by commandos and airborne troops, and certainly until the Browning 9mm starts to take over with airborne forces as well.
So in the game, the character does fire the pistol in one hand. There's no modern two-handed grasps, which came in later towards the end of the war, but weren't really a revolver thing. And I believe he does only fire double action, which is pulling the trigger straight through rather than pulling the hammer back.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of these down the range and see what they fire like. The machine gun changed the picture of warfare forever, and the Vickers machine gun played a key role in this, being used extensively throughout the 20th century by many different nations and organisations. At the Vickers MG Collection and Research Association, we hope to share our passion for educating and informing people about the Vickers. To do so, we need your support to build new content and preserve the information, collection and archive for the future. Find our Patreon online at www.patreon.com/VickersMG. So we're going to look at the pistols that are in the game now and test fire or practice some of those. So the one that's in the game is the Mark 6 Webley. This firing one is a 1916 example, and you know it would have been there at Al Alamein with the South Africans, perhaps Australians, etc., but it shouldn't be there really. So we load it manually. We haven't got any of the Prideaux chargers or anything like that. We'll put 6 rounds in the chamber, in the cylinder, and break open. So we're going to hold it there, and I'm just going to fire it. Double action. And a single action is where we draw it back. Like so, and to empty it, pop open, pop those out like that. Nice bit of positive action there, shows everything working right. Yeah, you know, 6 rounds and my wrist is already feeling it. That's an amazing weapon to fire like that. Matt, do you want to take a go?
So compared to a semi-automatic pistol, loading a revolver cylinder, it's a little bit more cumbersome, takes a little bit more time. So do some single action first, pull the hammer back. Stout recoil, but not too bad, manageable. There we go. So one thing that is in the manual of the time is being at the ready, like that. And that's pretty much how the game character is represented when he's carrying the pistol. And of course, there's no two-handed grips. It's all one-handed.
So what should be in the game is this Smith & Wesson 38. The British Army had transitioned from 4.55 to 38 just before the Second World War. 4.55 was no longer considered needed. The ranges for pistols, it went for a much lighter caliber. So yeah, 38 ammunition, much smaller. 6-round cylinder, the same. This is a Smith & Wesson we're firing, so different to the Enfields and the Webleys, but so it's a side opening gun. You know, Smith & Wesson is sort of commonly called the Victory revolver, and the ammunition is in British parlance is 38-200. So it's different to the 38, you know, the long 38 rounds. In the chamber, double action again. Much easier to hold on target. This one will fire single action as well, but we'll do double. We'll do 6 rounds. Easy to pop out there, pop those rounds out almost into the hand. Oh, they're a bit warm, they're unhappy. Come on, there we go. Much easier to handle, much better on the wrist. So Matt, do you want to come and take a go at those? Clear those, there's 6 rounds there for you.
It's a much smaller pistol. You can notice that immediately. Not only in cartridge size, but also in the frame of the revolver as well. So try a single action first. And then double action. It's a lot easier to hold on target. The recoil is much lighter. There's much less muzzle flip than with the 4.55 Webley. So you can get off much quicker double action shots.
Now what could also be in the game, because the British started to use this from, I suppose not from when they started to get automatics really. We bought these or got them on Lend-Lease, M1911s, Colt 45s, and they would see use with airborne and commando groups really. So it's nothing much more, certainly not infantry. However, Rex Fendick mentions carrying his own that he'd purchased from Canada, so he brought his own with him. 7-round magazine, usefully, Little holes in there so we can see how many rounds. So that's 5 holes. We can see that it's got the full 7 rounds in it. It's an automatic. It's got that grip safety on there as well. So we can load up, drop the slide forward. Much more aggressive pistol, much more aggressive than even that 4.55 revolver, because I can not only feel that in my wrist, but I can feel it in my elbow.
So the 1911 was adopted by the US in 1911. This is an M1911A1, which would have been the type used by British Commonwealth forces. Again, not in the game, but illustrative to fire. Let's see what this is like. Seven-round magazine, so you get one extra on top of what you would get in the Enfield or the Webley. Definitely a stout round. You can definitely feel it a bit more. The recoil on that is definitely much more appreciable. The 38 allows quite rapid fire, but you can do pretty rapid fire with the 45 ACP 1911 as well, I think. I can certainly see why it was favoured by commandos and airborne forces.
So there we've got the pistols from the game, and we talked about the fact that this is in the British faction, this is in the American faction. So the M1911 is available in the game, but only in the American faction. Could be in the British faction at a push. Certainly similar justification to some of the other choices. But this is the one, the 38. So that much less powerful revolver should be in the game for the majority, certainly for that squad leader kind of role. But as we said, it's the platoon leader's
exactly,
gun, really.
Yeah.
How did it feel shooting them for you, Matt?
I mean, there's definitely a noticeable difference in terms of recoil. The ergonomics of them are quite interesting as well. I feel like the 38 moves a little more in the hand because of the narrow grip at the top there. This has the sort of classic, almost straight kind of revolver grip.
But that's the thing that's actually quite particular to the Smith & Wesson.
It is, yeah.
So the
Smith &
Webley
Wessons
Mark IV or the Enfield No. 2 have a sort of more, let's say, British standard grip.
Exactly. And I mean, the top brake is great because you can very much see when that cylinder is empty, especially when you're trying to load another 6. Whereas with the Enfield, when you've got it out to the side, it's a little bit more your thumb's in the way when you're trying to load in those rounds. They're just small economic niggles, aren't they? Really,
they are.
The both guns have their positives and negatives for sure, but
and the 1911.
I mean, it's a classic design, John Browning. It has the stopping power.
Don't we, by law, have to call him John Moses Browning?
John Moses Browning.
John Moses Browning, yeah.
I think really in terms of rapid fire, 38's great. That 38-200 cartridge.
You just keep going.
Is it's a very flat shooting, but again, does it have that stopping power that the 45 has and the 9mm has?
Perhaps that's something for another day.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do stopping power in a lab range. And you can see some of that. So that is the 38 caliber cartridge. This is the 45 ACP, and then Matt there has the 4.55. Just some target ammunition. That's why it's flat there. But it should normally be ball like this. You can see the difference. That stopping power is going to be directly related to the power that's in the ammunition there. And one thing that is worth saying, that we're firing where the ammunition is trapped behind the range. You can actually hear how this isn't going through all of the baffles, whereas this stuff, and you can hear it dropping once it's beyond the first baffle, whereas this stuff, you just can't hear that at all. So much less powerful cartridge, but it was doing what the British wanted it to do, and it will still stop people that you want it to stop within the ranges that you're expecting to use a revolver with them.
Yeah, it's a personal defence weapon. The idea of going to the lighter cartridge was to make it easier on the shooter, wasn't it? So it's appreciably
found that
easier on the shooter.
You saw, I said, I found that firing 6 rounds for a 4.55 starts to feel it in the wrist. Firing 7 rounds of 45 afterwards, I'm feeling it in the elbow.
Yeah.
This, I feel like I could, much easier.
So you can definitely see there's a difference in how these revolvers perform. And of course, the 4.55 probably wouldn't have been the revolver used, but it's not historically incorrect.
No, it's not. And weirdly, we've got some random manuals and proof materials that show there was still proof in 4.55 ammunition into the 60s. So it was still around, but it certainly would have been the 38. And in another sort of twist, it certainly would have been 38, but not by the squad leader.
Yeah.
They'd have had an SMG, which we're going to be covering in later videos. But the next video we're going to cover is the anti-tank weapons. So the Pier and the Boys anti-tank rifle. So come over and find those.